In the annals of criminal history, few names evoke such visceral horror as Jeffrey Dahmer. For 13 years, this seemingly ordinary man prowled the streets of Milwaukee, leaving a trail of destruction that would ultimately claim 17 lives. But beyond the sensational headlines and lurid details lies a story that forces us to confront the darkest corners of human nature. Picture a quiet suburban street in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 1960. A baby boy is born into what appears to be a typical American family. Jeffrey Dahmer enters the world with all the promise and potential any child holds. Yet beneath this facade of normalcy, sinister undercurrents are already at work. His father, a brilliant but distant chemist, and his mother, wrestling with her own demons of mental illness, create an emotional vacuum that would shape young Jeffrey's psyche. As a child, Dahmer's fascination with death manifests in disturbing ways. While other children play with toys, he collects roadkill, meticulously dissecting the corpses in his makeshift laboratory. His father, perhaps seeing a reflection of his own scientific curiosity, unwittingly encourages this macabre hobby. It was just his jigsaw puzzle. Lionel Dahmer would later recall, his voice heavy with the weight of hindsight. The summer of 1978 marks the point of no return. 18-year-old Dahmer, alone in his family home following his parents' divorce, spots a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks. This chance encounter becomes the catalyst for a reign of terror that would span more than a decade. When Hicks attempts to leave, something inside Dahmer snaps. The murder is brutal, unplanned, but it awakens something primal in him, a hunger that would grow increasingly sophisticated and sadistic. The following years see Dahmer perfect his hunting grounds: gay bars, bus stops, shopping malls, anywhere vulnerable young men might be found. His method becomes a terrifying science: charm, isolate, drug, kill. But mere murder isn't enough. Dahmer's experiments grow increasingly bizarre, attempting to create living zombies by drilling into his victims' skulls and injecting acid into their brains. His apartment at 924 North 25th Street transforms into a chamber of horrors, where the boundaries between killer and mad scientist blur. The smell of death permeates the building. Neighbors complain about the strange odors. But Dahmer has an answer for everything: a broken freezer, bad plumbing. The excuses pile up like the bodies in his apartment. Society's indifference becomes his unwitting accomplice. Each victim has a name, a story, dreams that will never be realized. Anthony Sears, a 24-year-old aspiring model. Errol Lindsay, remembered by family as gentle and kind. Konarak Synthesophone, just 14 years old, whose attempted escape was thwarted by a system that failed him spectacularly. The police, confronted with a terrified Asian teenager and a convincing white man, make a fatal mistake in judgment. But like all reigns of terror, Dahmer's too must end. On July 22, 1991, Tracy Edwards breaks free from apartment 213, still wearing the handcuffs Dahmer had placed on him. The ensuing investigation reveals horrors that shock even hardened detectives. Severed heads in the refrigerator, photographs documenting unspeakable acts, industrial drums of acid used to dispose of remains. In the stark fluorescent lights of the interrogation room, Dahmer confesses with a detachment that chills investigators to their core. "I created this fantasy world," he explains, his voice steady and measured. "I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself." His words paint a picture of a man both monster and prisoner of his own desires, offering glimpses into an abyss of human depravity that few could comprehend. The trial becomes a media sensation. The courthouse in Milwaukee transforms into a theater of horror as Dahmer's crimes are laid bare before a stunned public. Families of victims weep openly, as prosecutors detail the final moments of their loved ones. Dahmer sits impassively, his blank expression becoming its own kind of testimony. The jury's verdict comes swiftly. 15 life sentences, totaling over 900 years behind bars. Behind the walls of Columbia Correctional Institution, Dahmer's life takes strange new turns. He creates disturbing food sculptures mimicking his crimes in miniature. His apparent religious conversion raises eyebrows. Is it genuine redemption or another manipulation? Fellow inmates watch him with a mixture of fear and disgust. Some see him as a celebrity, others as an abomination that needs to be erased. November 28, 1994, brings the final chapter. Christopher Scarver, armed with a metal bar from the prison weight room, decides to deliver his own version of justice. The attack is swift and brutal. Dahmer's life ends on the floor of a prison bathroom, his skull crushed by the same kind of violence he once inflicted on others. The news of his death spreads quickly, drawing mixed reactions. Some celebrate, others mourn the loss of true justice. But the story of Jeffrey Dahmer doesn't end with his death. His legacy lives on in the changed procedures of law enforcement, in the painful memories of victims' families, and in our collective consciousness. His crimes force us to confront uncomfortable questions about human nature, society's blind spots, and the thin line between sanity and madness. The apartment building where Dahmer committed his atrocities was eventually demolished, but its shadow still looms over Milwaukee. Each victim's story represents not just a life lost, but a failure of society to protect its most vulnerable. The case exposed deep-seated prejudices in law enforcement and highlighted how easily a predator could operate in plain sight when their victims came from marginalized communities. Modern depictions of Dahmer's crimes in books, films, and television series continue to captivate audiences while raising ethical questions about the glorification of serial killers. These portrayals walk a delicate line between education and exploitation, between understanding evil and celebrating it. In the end, Jeffrey Dahmer remains an enigma, a monster who looked like the boy next door, a killer who could be chillingly articulate about his crimes, a predator who exposed the fatal flaws in our social fabric. His story serves as a dark mirror, reflecting uncomfortable truths about human nature and society's capacity to overlook evil in its midst. The true horror of Jeffrey Dahmer isn't just in what he did, but in how long he was able to do it. In a world that prides itself on civilization and order, he showed us the chaos that lurks beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to emerge. His story isn't just about one man's descent into madness. It's about the collective blindness that allowed that descent to claim 17 innocent lives. As we close this chapter of criminal history, remember, sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones hiding under our beds, but the ones hiding in plain sight, wearing the mask of normalcy, waiting for their moment to strike. What are your thoughts on Jeffrey Dahmer's story? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories.